Hi, I'm IKEA, and for today's video, I want to have an in-depth look into the Pakhan and into the Nimble Holster, the two new exotics for Year 7, Season 1, as they come from the season track of it. As we'll go over how much they actually do, especially for the Pakhan, of course, and how much the Nimble Holster costs for its utility talent effectively. Of course, for that, I've prepared a spreadsheet, which will be linked down below and will timestamp everything so you can jump around. We'll start with the Nimble Holster as that is an easier one to cover and then go fully in-depth onto the Pakhan. So yeah, let's go get started. Let's start that discussion indeed by looking at the Nimble Holster. That is actually its name. It is called the Nimble Holster and it is a holster. I would have loved for them to actually call it Nimble Holster and it's just a glove or something. That would have been hilarious to me, but of course, yeah, wouldn't make much sense. The little flavor text on it is run for your life, and that is exactly actually what it does. You run and you get life. Normally, of course, this is used in a different way. In this case, it is actually quite literal. We get it with a red core and crit chance, crit damage on it. This is, of course, not one that we can reconfigure to any other stats or such like the Costa. This is what it is on all of them. Now, this was very important already with the PTS. The initial patch notes that we get always with the PTSs don't include actually what stats and what core it is on there. And my speculation from the start was already like, if it comes without weapon damage and crit chance, crit damage, it's kind of dead on arrival. At worst, it could be crit chance, crit damage, and then a blue core or some such. But yeah, it kind of needs to not lose too much damage. And in this case, it doesn't. Because yeah, we do effectively just give up the brand bonus or exotic talent. Now in this case as well, we can't of course put an exotic in once we have one in there. What do we get then with this? This is the talent on it, Bob and Weave, and this is receive repairs of 5%. And in PvP, this is 3% of your total armor for every 1 meter ran in cover to cover. Damage taken while doing a cover to cover is healed over 10 seconds. So as we are doing a cover to cover, for every meter, we're getting 5%. This means that in 20 meters, a cover to cover run of 20 meters will heal us all the way back up, 20 times 5, making for 100. Then as well, any damage taken in that time in the cover to cover is healed over 10 seconds. This means that it is delayed, so you're not instantly getting it back. You're not fully invincible while cover to covering. And yeah, but you will get it back if you lose it there. Now, the instant thing of this is, of course, this doesn't add damage. This does add healing. And healing is quite nice, but in especially Division, it isn't the most important thing, especially compared to some other games where it is, for instance, based on regen, where, you know, when you get damaged, just go sit in a corner, wait for your shield or your armor or your health to come back. It isn't based on, as some other games do, a very limited resource for healing or such, or that you can only heal through skills or, you know, spells and such. In Division, we have med packs. We have armor kits, officially. We all call them med packs, even though they're technically armor packs or armor kits. And we have 4 of those. They are abundant. If you are actually running low, the game actually throws more of them at you as you get kills. We can always also go back to a shared space or safe space, actually, and just get more of them. Even if we're in a mission or such, you can, once, you know, the fight's over, even if you're in group or solo, doesn't matter. You could go to a safe house, get back to full on ammo, on armor kits, and then go back to your checkpoint in the mission. It won't reset you to the start. It'll just put you back to where you gotten up to. And that's what it's compared or competing against the most. We already have a way for, in a few seconds, to heal all the way back up to full. And to show what it does, I'm running here a striker with just the Pakhan as well, and then together with the Nimble Holster. Let's be nimbly bimbly, and let's actually put it a little bit into action. I'm just gonna leave that elite and kind of kill these two. I know this wave spawns. I'm gonna take one to the face. And yeah, while we lost some armor there, I'm just gonna do a cover to cover, recover a lot of it. And also, of course, getting us out of dodge. And yeah, as we do one more, although not even need it fully, we get a lot of armor back. In Division 1, there was the Nimble, as it is. Both of these, the Pakhan and the Nimble, are kind of Division 1 based talents. In Division 1, it was a holster talent. It would give you 2% per meter. So you would have to do a 50 meter cover to cover. In here, of course, it isn't. I'm gonna just go get myself damaged a little. So for instance, even a half armor bar lost like that, if I do a cover to cover from there to there, that's enough. The thing is though that I end up not using cover that much. I'm generally not that much in cover. I do use cover as a concept, but not as not the actual system in the game. So what I will do is stand more behind tall cover like this and kind of shoot that guy, shoot this guy, poke out, shoot this guy. And then what it also, of course, competes against is that if I get smacked by this guy, let's say, and I take him out afterwards, I can just, instead of doing a whole cover to cover, just do that and just use a meds back. And then, as well, just have gear that maybe gives me a damage talent. Because here, of course, we're giving up effectively either the brand bonus or the exotic talent that we could have there. And what it then especially is competing against is Coyote, of course, and in the future as well, Tinkerer, for instance. And that is the biggest loss of it. While it is effective and can keep you alive, it isn't that useful in PvE. Now in PvP, where you have just 2 med packs and actually healing up in between fights is a lot more valuable. This can have a much better result. And there as well, for a crit chance, crit damage build, this will fit in fine. On the PvE end, while we don't lose too much, as we'll see in a second with the numbers, it is just a mechanic that we already have. And then what it especially is competing against is things like the Exodus glyphs. And that is then also, on the damage end, actually how it kind of aligns for the Nimble Holster. As yeah, in comparison to, for instance, having a Coyote, we would just then have the Coyote talent, which is of course much more damage-based, and this is then utility-based and healing us. Even up against the normal brand bonus, so instead of, for instance, having Grupo there, or for Grupo having that 13 crit damage, we are then getting its talent in here, of course. This is the exact same numbers in result, because as the Exodus, as we do have the same red core and crit chance, crit damage. If we kind of take it to the spreadsheet that I've prepared for today, this is on the third multi-calculator, the other one's being kind of tied to the Pakhan. If we kind of zoom in here on this one specifically, we have it with the Coyote up against the Nimble here. And if we have the Coyote in the right range, because the build is of course kind of set up for 51 crit chance, and we're kind of especially targeting that 15 to 25 meter range to get the best results, the way that the build normally is set up. And here we're basically flipping the Coyote to a striker mask, and then the Nimble Holster comes in. And what we have is the Coyote, especially in the wrong ranges. So if we're too close or too far, you do lose a little bit already with that 51 crit chance setup. You basically lose 2.5% in either kind of range, or 2.25% in kind of either of those ranges. But of course, with the Nimble, we're losing even more, because even there in the wrong ranges, we're kind of getting still some damage out of it. Here, of course, it is a utility talent. We have to kind of consider it as well that, yeah, it's not that we're just not getting in anything in return. We get the healing in return by doing the cover to cover. With the Nimble, of course, out, we need to set up our crit chance, crit damage. Now, there's 2 ways to kind of go about it. Both are pretty close to each other, and yeah, it kind of depends on what you find easier. And of course, if you're, for instance, using an exotic, because here we have the Nimble with 57. This is just the same build, but then adding 1 crit chance mod to it. The other way to go with it is to actually flip the 3 crit chance mods on the weapon to 3 crit damage mods. And that lands you on a perfect 60, because then if you take 4 crit chances on the gear in return as replacement, you basically shift the crit chance 3 points, because you're replacing a 5 with a 6. Your crit damage, of course, also goes down by the inverse of that. So it's not that you're just gaining crit chance, you're losing a little bit of crit damage, but at least you're landing on that 60. And that 60 is very important, especially, for instance, for killer, or if you're running fast standstill, and even, for instance, obliterate. You will perform a tiny bit better on obliterate with the 60 instead of that 57. So it does actually behoove you to kind of balance out your crit chances. And now that we have the crit chance mods and the crit damage mods being equivalent on weapons as well, we can actually go this route. That 60 actually, does come out ahead, of course, here, but it's by a tiny margin. It's not a big difference on this damage end, but it is a little bit more as well. A little faster on the obliterate, is a little better. On killer if we're running that, or fast stands if we're running that. So it is actually an improvement. But of course, we can't do this if we're running an Elmo, which has fixed 15 crit chance, and you can't change that. So in this case, though, yeah, the Nimble is definitely losing about 6.5%, we can say, up against the Coyote. That's effectively what the Coyote's talent kind of adds in here, although we're still on 100% headshot rate. We're going to drop that in a second. Versus the 0 to 15, it is a little bit closer, but still, it is still around 4% behind that. But this is also very dependent on how much headshot rating we do, because of course the more crit chance and crit damage that we have, diluting it more with the headshot, it actually does affect it. If we drop this headshot rate to 20%, which is kind of the number I generally go with for this, now we are above the 8% mark here. So it is 8 and a little bit percent there. The Coyote being in the wrong ranges as well now actually is, instead of that 2.25, is closer to 3%. And this, of course, kind of, at least for me, a little bit closer to reality. And this is usually what we say of the Coyote is 8 to 9%, depending on the build, of course, as well. Now, let's say if we have the Coyote coming from somewhere else, so we have already a Coyote in the team, or several even. If we then compete the Nimble versus a Grupo piece, which would be just, another 13 crit damage on top, there as well, especially if we kind of take this inter with 100% being the Nimble at 60 here, and then instead of that going with the Grupo piece nets us kind of 7.5%, just with its brand bonus. So even if there are other Coyotes in the team, and we are taking, for instance, a Grupo, and we'll go like, oh, okay, it's kind of, instead of that, we'll take a Nimble, that is still a decent loss. 7% is nothing to scoff at. That will actually feel quite a bit weaker. It isn't as big, of course, as just, a bad build or such. This is still a good build, fully red, although the redness doesn't equate to a good build, but it is set up competently, let's say, with crit chances and crit damages and such. And because of that, it will perform, of course. But yeah, we are giving up. We have to just acknowledge how much damage we do lose. And this is, of course, again, exact numbers that we already have seen with the Exodus. So if you already know how much you lose with that, kind of how much you lose here. But of course, we don't just lose it. We're not just throwing this damage away. In return, we get this healing talent. And that is always going to be the thing with the Nimble Holster. It is competing against several other pieces, some for damage, but even, for instance, for me, well, I've enjoyed kind of actually running this, and it does feel comfortable. I do have to say that, just having that cover to heal me, I've been just going more into cover, just cover to covering a little bit here and there and healing myself up. It does feel like a comfortable pajamas kind of that you just crawl into. But also in actual, when we have to kind of try hard, I wouldn't pick this just by itself, because it is competing with a tool that I already have and I will always have, and I don't have to give up any damage for it, which is the armor packs. Because also, I would much rather than this talent, I would much rather just have another striker piece here and go with, one of its closest competitors, which is, in this case, this Exodus gloves. Because that Exodus glove, that armor break, and the smoke bomb of it, that opens up a lot more in possibilities. And that's always going to be the thing with the Nimble Holster. It has a few good competitors with it, especially the Coyote. I would say the Bloody Knuckles, especially as well. In a little bit, we'll have the Tinkerer as well to compete with it. It is taking up an exotic slot, and for that, it isn't giving us something unique, because this armor break, this can be used very creatively in a lot of ways, and even give you a full heal if you just still armor swap or weapon swap while you've just been armor broken. If you just weapon swap, actually you heal back up to full, which is actually easier to do, of course, on a longer cooldown, but then also, yeah, kind of doing the smoke bomb effect. Now, of course, this in group settings, I would lean more towards the Nimble than this if I'm picking between the two, because yeah, I don't want to do this in a group. In a group, this is kind of a dick move. This is kind of just like, hey guys, take my aggro. It's kind of like hold my beer, but then instead of hold my beer, you hand them a grenade. And yeah, that's not a kind thing to do to your teammates. So there is moments like that. Will I be running the Nimble much? In my case, I don't think I will. I might have it here and there on some of my characters. And for places where it doesn't matter much, I might run this. Although for me personally as well, if I'm basically solo and I kind of want survivability that maybe this could provide, I'm already going to be loading up a tech tank and having that survivability be my shields and kind of have the damage up front there as well. So overall, the Nimble, while not bad, definitely, because yeah, it could have been a much worse deal, especially if some of these stats weren't there. For instance, as we see next door with the Shocker Punch, that yeah, just doesn't see much use. And a big part of that is that we're giving up even more damage. And unless we're really making use of Hazard Protection, Explosive Resistance, it doesn't make sense. Here at least the stats are there, and kind of same with the Exodus. The stats are luckily there for it to fit into a red build well. It can be used, and especially kind of if you get into the rhythm of it, you'll be healing yourself up here and there quite consistently, making it a little bit more comfortable, but it is just an opportunity cost thing. I would much rather have an Exodus if I'm just running a red build, but if I'm just already in kind of that mindset of kind of being in more of a casual play session, I'm going to just swap the tech tank. So yeah, let's go start looking at the other one. And that is, of course, the Pakhan, as I've been informed on how to pronounce it. And the Pakhan is an exotic light machine gun. The flavor text is pack another one of those big mags. And that is kind of its mechanic as well. It is based on the RPK, and it has the base stats of that. Then together with that, its talent is each kill with this weapon gains a stack of 75% base magazine size, and the base is very important here. Increase to the next magazine up to 4 stacks. So each kill that we get basically gets us 1 stack, and this is also actually proxy kills, shooting for instance an RC car or a drone or something like that. That all counts as stacks. Each of those stacks adds 75% of the base magazine size. That is an important distinction here. That is not the 60, because this 60 is a 40 plus a 20 round magazine here. Now, I feel they could have just saved themselves a lot of trouble by just setting the base amount to 60, which they can, because we see that in other weapons where there isn't a magazine here extra, but here, yeah, the base amount is what is affected, so it is 40. So it is taking 75% of 40, which is 30, of course, and we can get that up to 4 stacks. In the PTS, this was a 50%. They bumped this up to a 75%, and as well actually changed up a few of its mods. So this weapon damage mod was a 5 weapon damage mod. It had 2 5 crit chance mods. Now that has been changed to 15 weapon damage just as a whole. The crit chances have been combined into 1 mod and then plus 5 as well. So we've gained 10 weapon damage, we've gained 5 crit chance since the PTS, and also even gained this reload speed. As yeah, one of the worst traits of the RPKs now is their atrocious reload speeds. Now, of course, this being an utility talent, effectively a magazine-based talent, it doesn't actually add anything to our burst DPS. It does add, of course, the sustained DPS, which does account for the mag size, but effectively what this is on the burst DPS end is an RPK, which could already, of course, have 15 crit chance. But then here we have also the reload speed plus, and actually on a normal RPK, we would have the plus 20 round mag, but then a minus 10 reload. So actually in difference, it is a 20% difference, because we're going from a minus 10 to a plus 10 effectively versus a normal RPK. And then we're getting this 15 weapon damage as kind of a part of the bonuses. So yeah, let's go see actually how that stacks up. And for that, let's take it to this spreadsheet where I've laid out the Pakhan here at the top, here with 0 stacks, 2 stacks, and 4 stacks. In this multi-calculator, we're especially kind of looking at the sustain end of things, because of course the talent is kind of sustain based. We are just getting extra mag size out of it. As we can kind of see, the burst damage between 0 stacks and 4 stacks doesn't change. That's the same because yeah, magazine size doesn't affect burst DPS, it only affects sustain DPS. That's also kind of why we have sustain DPS, because otherwise you have nothing to compare here. So we're kind of looking at it that way. Here as well, it is important to actually keep in mind, we have it on Coyote 0 to or 15 to 25 for a lot of this discussion, except for this last part where we're on 0 to 15. We have 30 grading already going, and also we're setting it to 20% headshot rate, which of course affects the weapons a little bit because they have different crit chances and crit damages. Here as well, with the Pakhan, I'm going crit chance third stat for basically all of this discussion, except for one last part where we'll actually discuss that third stat. If we look at the Pakhan in 4 stacks here with its 180 rounds, giving us the full increase of it, we take that as our 100% is on there, but here actually on the side, we're comparing all of the other weapons on the sustain end versus the 4 stack of it. We can already see that with 2 stacks, when we get 2 kills and then reload, we're already getting a lot of the increase on the sustain end that we would get, because from the jump from 2 to 4, it isn't as big of a deal. Because of course, as we increase our firing time, which is effectively what a larger magazine will allow you to do, we are kind of getting diminishing returns in that way as well, because of course, as we add in more to that, the reload still stays the same. So we are getting results from it, but each time we're adding to it, it is actually reducing the returns from it in the sustain end. If we compare it to this RPK with no talent, although in this case I basically mean no damage talent, because this could be preservation, this could be future perfect, anything that doesn't per se add to either burst or sustain end of things. We see that actually the difference in mods, because that's actually the thing here on the burst end, because the normal RPK will have 3 mod slots. Those will be filled with the 15 words of crit chance. The base stats are the same between the RPK and the Pakhan. And what we then see is that, yeah, we're kind of, in this case, with 30 grading, it is about a 3.5% difference. If we actually take out the grading, putting it down to 0, the difference becomes a little bit bigger when we take that out, as of course we're gaining now in relation more from weapon damage if we aren't as high. So yeah, it does depend actually how many blue cores you have, what this difference is going to be. But here for full red, we can kind of say it's between about 4 to 3.5% on a full red, depending on grading, as we take it back up to 30 grading there. And of course, on the sustain end, it's much worse for it, as again, that mod, or especially the Pakhan having a plus 10 or a plus 10 reload speed. On the RPK, actually, to get to the 60, we need to take a magazine plus 20 minus 10% reload. So it is actually a 20% difference between them, going from minus 10 to a plus 10. And yeah, we see that actually very much here. And that's one of the bigger downsides of the RPK in general. So this kind of solves that. But then, of course, here, we're not taking it into account with a damage talent. We will do so, of course, in a little bit, although with different weapons. Then its biggest competitor and kind of in the same mind space as and play space as the Pakhan is of course the Bullet King. The Bullet King just a Negev that just doesn't reload and even gives ammo back to you and your teammates. It has effectively a 0-second reload. It just doesn't reload. That's how we kind of represent it in here. Its burst is its sustain. And if we look at its burst, especially the Pakhan, of course, now that it has a few buffs to it, has had a few buffs before the release, 5 more crit chance, 10 more weapon damage. We see that actually here that it is now quite a bit removed from it, about 10% in burst difference. That is actually quite a lot. And in the PTS, my conclusion was kind of with the Pakhan back then, with worse mods, was why would we run it if we can just run a Bullet King? Because it was about 4%-ish ahead. Now that it's kind of closer to 10% ahead, even though on sustain, it isn't ahead still, of course, because it is kind of hard to beat no reload. But of course, it's going to take a while for... especially because also it's starting way lower on the burst end for this sustain to kind of matter. We don't have fights that are long enough for that. But of course, mechanically, they work differently. Bullet King can just fire and just do its thing and has its sustain always. Its burst is its sustain and its sustain is always there. On the Pakhan, of course, we need to get kills. Now, the magazine actually is pretty well set up. They've made it so that, well, of course, as you're starting to get kills, you'll get some kills maybe in the first 60-round mag that you'll have. Even if you get 2 kills, now you're already gone to, yeah, that's 120 that we have here. Now it's, of course, easier to get even more kills. And then, you know, you might get 3 stacks then, and then be on 150, and then eventually be on the 180. And once you have the 180, unless you're on a very weak build, and of course the thing with this, it is on kill talent, you want your build to actually kind of be powerful enough to get 4 kills consistently in its max size. But once you're kind of on that 4 stacks, it's kind of keeps going pretty well. Also magazine-wise, it actually works out pretty well, which we'll show in a second, because it doesn't allow you, for instance, to reload if it would give you less rounds in return. So they've set it up actually pretty well like that. So yeah, now actually there is enough difference, in my opinion, with the Bullet King to kind of situationally, if you already are running Bullet King, for instance, to situationally maybe swap to a Pakhan, because yeah, you do gain a lot of upfront damage, a lot of burst damage out of it. But then, especially if we kind of compare it to an MG5 here as well, first with no talent, it is actually out-sustaining the base Pakhan. But of course, if we kind of compare it to once it has all 4 stacks, which is this this side, yeah, it is nowhere close on the sustain end. It isn't per se that close on the burst end with no damage talents. But even here, kind of while we're still looking at sustain end of things, if we just put in fast hands on that MG5, so we run it as a fast hands, then kind of account for how many rounds we have, what our crit chance is, and then together with that, kind of how many fast hand stacks we could get theoretically, we can see that actually still it isn't up to par versus the Pakhan. So if you are getting those kills, and you're kind of okay with a little bit fast or slower reload, because of course that the reload time, even if the sustain is better and such, a shorter reload times means less time that you're without ammo in your weapon. And as long as you have ammo in your weapon, you might be able to hit some headshots, maybe stagger an enemy, hit a weak point or 2, maybe stagger them that way, or even remove an enemy. When you can't shoot, you just can't shoot. You just have to hide, hunker down, and maybe try to avoid the enemies. But sometimes as well, that's just, if you just had some ammo, even with less damage, you might have better results just because, yeah, you can, whenever you have ammo, you can actually affect your outcomes a little bit better. So, for instance, for these cases, but then as well, of course, fast hands doesn't require a kill. It is just hits on enemies to build up the reloads increase, and that's then what you get out of it. The Pakhan still, of course, needs the kills. But those kills, yeah, especially in activities, if you're just doing bounties, public executions, stuff like that, you can get those kills. So, but all 3 all three of these, the Pakhan, the Bullet King, and this MG5 with fast hands, are kind of, yeah, they require different things. And depending on your requirements, you might pick different ones. Because, yeah, I would say especially now with the mods that it has, I wouldn't per se pick an MG5 with fast hands over it for general play. I would just rather be with the Pakhan. It has decent burst damage. I would try to keep the 4 stacks going and then just keep them going. Here as well, we're kind of now looking at them at Coyote 0 to 15, because this is also an important discussion, because actually, because it has 15 crit chance on the weapon, we can't actually play around too much with its crit chances the way that we can on a high end. So actually the high end here is actually on 50.5. And that is just done by taking 1 crit chance mod. So instead of taking 15 on the weapon and then 9.5 as a third stat, we're taking 9.5 as a third stat, 1 crit chance mod for 14.5, which actually also is kind of nice because now it has kind of similar crit chances as ARs, so it can just go directly into an AR build, which would then land on a 51 because it has 14.5, and then on the other slots we can take crit damage. Now, almost all of the LMGs will have at least one slot where they can slot in a crit damage. Most of them, you do need a long underrail for that slot, but of course here with the MG5, it can be the laser can go in the underrail because it does have a short underrail, but then it can have a scope with a plus 10 crit damage. If we look at them on the wrong ranges, basically, for the MG5 here, because now the Pakhan is actually going to pull out even ahead of it, even more, because it has 54 crit chance, and then kind of now is in the wrong range, so it's not getting the plus 10 from the Coyote, but it's getting a plus 25 crit damage from there. And now they separate out even further. So this is kind of the worst case scenario for the MG5 setup here with the Coyote. And yeah, that separation is quite a bit larger then as well. So the Pakhan here does actually stand a chance if you're kind of in this mindset of Bullet King or maybe an MG5 with fast hands. Let's go actually then to the second part where it kind of falls apart. Because as much as we've praised it up there for competing well against sustain end of things, what if we aren't putting in no talent or a sustain talent on the MG5? What if we just go on the damage end of things? So here we have it up against an MG5. We're just taking the 4-stack version on the burst end, as we already discussed. It doesn't matter too much. This is in here mostly a burst discussion. And of course, we kind of lean more towards burst CPS. In Division, there aren't many fights that are so long that we're just going to lean more towards the sustain end, because it will be several mags in a row. We can kind of say into the 7-8 mag round range. It depends, of course, what the sustain of each weapon is, where one might overtake another. For instance, the Pakhan overtaking the MG5 with a killer or such. This could be up to 7 or 8 mags of 180 before it overtakes a lower weapon here. If we take it now with, yeah, killer, measured, streamline, first for the MG5, and also the no talent version, as we said, I had a second ago. And especially as well, here, let's already take it to 30 grading. We have it on 20% headshot rate. That is important because, yeah, if we put it at 100% headshot rate, especially killer is very much affected by that. The grading will affect how much streamline will affect the numbers outcome here. But if we just take this trifecta with the metrics we've chosen here, yeah, especially the killer LMG here, and we saw the MG5 was kind of behind it. But then that was just because of the mods that it has. It does have really good mods. 15 crit chance, 15 weapon damage is nothing to scoff at. But killer is also nothing to scoff at. Now, of course, even here, just because killer is raising just the general damage by so much, the sustain also goes up. So here, we're basically doing the same sustain as Pakhan, with killer, just because we do have a decent enough reload here on the MG5. That's especially as well why I'm kind of going with the MG5. I really like the reload on it, not just for this calculations. I mean, in general, I like running the MG5 quite a bit. But even if we take it with, for instance, measured, we're kind of 5% ahead, and measured killer, of course, still requires some kills, but that would be the case for the Pakhan as well. So it is actually a fair comparison. I feel more so here than in some other places. Measured, though, we can kind of say is kind of always active. That is still kind of 5.5% ahead. It is quite a bit behind on the sustained end of things, but it would take quite a while for this Pakhan to overtake it. And of course, as well, then it needs to kind of have the kills going. Measured would be the one I would go with when you're not, for instance, shooting at things that you're guaranteed to get kills on, you know, raid bosses, incursions, and such. This is very consistent there. Streamline as well. We could, of course, make it consistent by just not using our skills. It is a hefty price to pay, but we do get, even because this is, again, kind of the worst case scenario for it, a full red build with it active and then also full grading. It is still then 10% ahead and just 5% ahead behind it on the sustain end. All of those make for more compelling use cases in the Pakhan. For me, I would much rather just have this MG5 with measured be kind of 6%, 5.5% ahead, even though on longer engagement, I would be kind of behind, but then also I don't have to deal with the talent of this at all, right? I don't have to actually get kills. And if I'm getting kills anyway, I'm going to bump it up to this killer. We're around the same sustain just because we're upping the general damage by so much. And yeah, we're kind of 13%, almost 14% ahead on, on the burst end of things, killing so much faster. Let's take it as well, as we kind of discussed with the frenzy changes and also, yeah, the huntsman in a previous video. The M249 now with frenzy really works out well. That's also why I'm not taking a Sleipnir here. If we take this M249 / Mark 46 with frenzy, and when frenzy is, of course, active, this wouldn't be active for the first mag, but let's say we prep it. Then what results do we get out? Yeah, we're really getting silly here, of course. This is, of course, just for 9 seconds, not practical, but just to give a little bit of a comparison to, yeah, what we could extract with some of the damage talents and then kind of taking it to its logical extreme with frenzy here. 50% behind on burst, 15% ahead on sustain, even though we're kind of upping the RPM so much and we have a horrendous reload on the Mark 46s and such. It is just so much damage that, yeah, it bumps up the sustain by enough that it even surpasses it. Now, of course, this requires it to be prepped beforehand if you just want to see these kind of numbers. So you need to kind of empty it out, have it ready to swap to, and then maybe use it in that way. You wouldn't want to just use it because then, of course, you're way below it. But so is kind of the Pakhan. When you're starting out, it is actually a little bit below. Yeah, let's actually look for a second at how it works in the game with its talent and to show actually how its reloading mechanic works in the game and also to show its icons. So there's always the icon once you have the Pakhan equipped. So if I kind of go to a different weapon and go back, it is that icon that popped up next to Striker. Once we start getting kills, as I'm gonna start getting here, it starts filling up a bar underneath, which goes up to 4, of course, the max stacks. It is next to the Obliterate. It's the furthest one out there. If we get 4 here, and then now, of course, I can reload and get 180 rounds. When we do that, so quite often it will still allow you to have one more reload afterwards, which is just the tactical reload that we would normally have. Here, though, it is allowing it me once I actually shot 1 round there. But then afterwards, it isn't allowing me any other more reloads because, of course, here we would be on 0 stacks and we would basically drop down to 60 rounds. So it's just preventing that. But the way that it's preventing it is that it isn't just that if you were to gain more magazine size or something that it would allow it, because it is just capped that you have to be 60 or below to reload. And here, for instance, I have 3 stacks. I'm at 145 rounds. If I were to reload now with those 3 stacks, I should technically go to 150. That should be, you know, the mag from 3 stacks. It doesn't allow it, and it will not allow it until I all the way take it down, as we'll just keep the trigger on there, even as we go lower and lower towards the 60. So even on 61, it doesn't allow it. one more round. Now, with those 4 kills, it allows it, and we go back to 181. If I fire again a few times, it'll allow 1 reload just for a tactical reload. But actually, you saw that the number didn't go up because we were on 181. So this is kind of still buggy. So it does still allow you to waste a reload time, but it doesn't allow you to waste the ammo that comes with it. So a little clunky still, but yeah, it is actually welcome that we can't actually hit the reload and lose ammo with it, even though sometimes, yeah, we do take the reload time just for a tactical reload effectively, but one that doesn't actually give us ammo. But yeah, even for instance here, I can't actually hit reload and throw away the 120 rounds that I have, even though we should go up to 180. It still wants us to go below 60 before it allows that reload. And also another important thing to discuss, let's say we get 1 stack of the Pakhan, and now we want to, for instance, use our secondary. What happens if we swap to it and back, we lose all our stacks. Then as well, what happens if we have some ammo in there? Let's get, for instance, well, let's go get the full 4 stacks if we can, which we can, just barely there. I'm going to hit the reload. We're going to go to 181. I'm going to swap to my secondary and then back, and it's down to 61 again. So swapping off of the Pakhan, kind of like with the Chameleon and such, is a very big detrimental thing to do. So you want to be running it as the main and just maining it the whole time. And one final discussion we kind of need to have is to actually discuss the Pakhan and its third stat. Kind of in the same way as the Bullet King, I, for instance, as well, in the LMG tables, have it with both a crit chance third stat and a rate of fire third stat. And the rate of fire third stat actually for that setting works out better, which is for an obliterate striker in the 15 to 25 meter range of the Coyote. And this is basically the same setup here, and then also actually including the DTA that we have actually on the LMG tables, on the LMG on striker tables. But actually, if we take this and put this to 100% headshot rate and 100% DTA, and this is kind of the thing that some people use these metrics to kind of discuss these with. And then, yeah, if we kind of look at the crit chance version versus the rate of fire versus DTA, and this is especially because the crit chance version, we don't get to, with high ends, of course, we are able to put mods in there to either go towards crit chance or crit damage. Nowadays as well, we can actually go with crit damage mods because they're 10. They used to be 5, of course. You would never pick them in the past. Nowadays, especially on LMGs, what I do is take crit chance third stat, put 1 crit chance mod on there. The rest goes into crit damage. And that way, it is actually 14.5 crit chance on the weapon. That means that it's also very similar to ARs, which are 15 generally, depending on the weapon. But for instance, the Lexington, FAMAS and such that have 3 mod slots, they have generally 15 crit chance in them. So they kind of line up well together, which I kind of like. With the Pakhan, of course, we can't actually change its mods. So it is stuck with that 15 crit chance. The Bullet King is in a similar place. And then actually, if we are looking at them in this Coyote, here especially in the 15 to 25 and the 0 to 15, if we actually look at the 0 to 15 numbers here for a second, because the Pakhan with a rate of fire third stat can actually land on a 51 crit chance, and this Pakhan is kind of stuck at this 54.5, especially if we're kind of discussing it in this 15 to 25 meter range, it is at a disadvantage, of course, because we're effectively wasting from these 1 crit chance, because that's, of course, hitting the crit cap. Here we're wasting 4.5. But even then, if we actually compare them to each other, the rate of fire, as we see here, is kind of 1.5% ahead with the metrics that we have now, because especially the headshot rate and the DTA rate really affect this discussion, the DTA rate, especially, of course, with the DTA third stat. Because actually, if you look at it this way, with DTA at 100%, then it would seem that we should go DTA, especially here. Now, this number is going to be closer actually with weapons where we can swap out the mods. For instance, taking 1 crit damage mod and 1 more crit chance mod on the gear, we land on a 50.5, and it's actually even better than the 51 at that 15 to 25 meter range here, of course. But what happens if we actually swap out the headshot rate? Now, generally, as most will know, I generally pick a 20% headshot rate as a number kind of signifying general gameplay. This number is, of course, going to be dependent on your gameplay, if there are heads to be shot, because some fights just don't have heads at all with Warhound bosses or such. But this is just my pick. If we look at it then, now the difference has kind of subsided. It's now within a percent, and the sustain is actually even closer, and that's mostly down to this RPM being higher, of course. So we're reloading more effectively. The firing time is shorter, even if you're doing more damage in that time. It isn't that big of a difference. But then especially on the 15 or 0 to 15 meter range, where this Pakhan is on 54.5 and the other ones are on 51, if we're in the wrong range, basically too short, it is about 0.85% ahead, but then also on this end, it is 1.66 behind, 1.67 behind. If we're in the wrong range. So it kind of depends as well, how much are you actually in that 15 to 25? Because also, if you believe that you're more in this 0 to 15, you could actually set up the build much more towards that. And in that case as well, just one crit chance mod will take you to, well, 60.5 and then capped at 60, of course. With these ones, it would be a little bit more fiddly because, yeah, you would land on 57 is your best bet there if you're going basically without the Coyote, for instance. Or if you're just really believing that, yeah, you can make it work in those short ranges. I would say definitely for the Pakhan here, the mid ranges is kind of the place I feel it lives. So that's a rate of fire already a little bit down, but even still, the DTA seems quite a bit ahead. And this is then again as well, the discussion about DTA rate and how much do we feel we hit armor versus health. I would say that that is depending on, it's a very dependent on content, and also if you're solo or in group. I'm, as a general number, just picking 60%. I feel that is a good representation of somebody that kind of, yeah, is playing solo and in groups and kind of, you know, doing countdowns here and there, especially because there it's it's pretty heftily towards even being higher DTA rates. If you're solo, and especially going solo, for instance, against Black Tusk and such, which have heavies and warhounds and mini tanks that are all health. So yeah, then it leans more towards health. It's very debatable, this number, but let's take 60. And then we see that, yeah, the DTA even falls behind the rate of fire here. This generally as well, when we say go rate of fire over DTA, it applies to everything. So depending though, if you are actually going up against armor a lot, or if you're using it in specific situations. So for instance, for some secondaries, this can be handy. If you do know that with DTA, you're going to beat out rate of fire, then yeah, you kind of go that route. Although keep in mind that it won't beat crit chance. In quite often, it will be just a little bit ahead of it, because with other weapons, yeah, we can swap out the crit chances to be in a little bit of a better place. But now as well, this one is even further behind if we're in the wrong ranges. So this is why I will still go with this Pakhan with crit chance. In the metrics that I kind of like using here, they're kind of equivalent in the right range. It isn't that big of a difference between the three. It is a difference when we're in the wrong range, when we're in the short range. So because of course here, the crit chance being higher is an advantage. This disadvantage becomes an advantage. Although I still want to play mostly in the 15 to 25 meter range because we just, on absolute numbers, do more. Because of course, keep in mind that this section is just comparing towards this one. But yeah, we're losing not much though, as we see here. Not as much as, for instance, if we actually have 51 crit chance. Because if we compare this one to this one, we're losing about 200k. Between these two, it's 40k or something. So that's a pretty insignificant number difference on 11 million, right? Actually, we have it here as well, comparing to the 15 to 25. So yeah, we're 99.63. So yeah, the other ones lose out a little bit more. But this is, of course, very dependent on, yeah, how much headshot rate do you feel you hit, how much DTA rate. Keep in mind as well, as if you, for instance, go like, I don't hit headshot as much at all, that actually, of course, lifts up the crit chance number. So yeah, it kind of depends on which of these metrics you pick, how this discussion might go for you in your head. But I would say, yeah, I'm just generally going to pick crit chance still here, but with the Bullet King and with the Pakhan, there is definitely a better case to be made than with other weapons for rate of fire and DTA. Because yeah, in other weapons, the crit chance is just generally ahead unless you really take the DTA at 100% value. And to conclude this in-depth look into the Nimbly Bimbly holster and into the Pakhan, as yeah, I still do enjoy kind of thinking of this name as that, as just a chicken going Pakhan. But all jokes aside, these two are not jokes. They aren't perfect in any way. That's not the new meta. The new meta is not here. But they are definitely effective. I've been enjoying actually running around with the Nimble holster. If you are already a player that really prefers to play in cover and using the cover system especially as well, this could fit into your gameplay quite well. For me, the Exodus gloves gives me a much better tool than this. And also, of course, it just competes with putting on more damage and just using the med packs. Now, of course, sometimes we do run out of med packs, but then you have to just learn to be smarter. Or if you don't want to, yeah, just use this and heal back up. This 5% is pretty strong, as yeah, some may have seen footage of this being used in legendaries and such, and being very survivable against certain enemies. The thing is, though, that at the end of the day, which we didn't kind of discuss here either, is that the health gate is a much more important mechanic than healing. Because even if you get healed for a bajillions through this talent, if you're getting hit by a sniper that is taking you to health gate, the first shot will take you to health gate, even if you're cover to covering, and even if you take that shot while you're doing this cover to cover, you will still get downed. If the hit is big enough and goes through all of your health and armor, the first time is the health gate, the second time is a down. And that's always the thing with healing. Healing can be very strong, but it is always kind of contingent on, in this game especially, things that are hitting for very, very hard, that aren't chip damage. This is especially nice against chip damage. Then on the Pakhan end, it is a weapon that actually, yeah, does do decently well. Now that they gave it better mods, it is in a much better state than it was in the PTS. In the PTS, I was kind of, for me, with its stats, it was kind of dead on arrival, but that's also why I was hoping they would change it, and they did. The 5 extra crit chance, the 10 extra weapon damage, the little bit extra reload speed, and of course as well, even extra bigger mag to it, as it used to be a 50% of the base magazine size, now it's a 75%. All of those have helped it a little bit to kind of separate it from its biggest competitor in my eyes, which is the Bullet King. And the Bullet King now definitely is a lot less damage than this, but of course doesn't have this on-kill component. Each kill is pretty easy to do to get when you're solo, for instance, and just doing heroic stuff. It becomes a little harder, for instance, if you're in groups where you're competing for each kill with this weapon. And there, for instance, players that are already leaning towards the Bullet King and such, especially solo, might find some use in the Pakhan that way. But that's already also not me. For instance, in some of the global events, I do use the Bullet King. I definitely enjoy it for some of the global events where we get a lot of damage, but we don't get any reload mechanics. So then I feel it is in a good place to use it. But in general, I would much rather have a weapon with a big damage talent. Now, it doesn't need to be Frenzy here. For instance, on the secondary, we could just have a killer MG5. That has been one of my go-tos. Here as well, we have killing an enemy. We do need that on kill. So if we're killing an enemy anyway, do I want extra magazine size or do I want extra damage? Although, well, this is a chance base, of course. 1 and 2 kills on at the very least will likely trigger this. Although, of course, the activation rate of kill are pretty high, but that's a whole different discussion. Do I want more damage or do I want a bigger mag? I'm always going to lean towards the more damage, especially when the more damage is as much damage as we have now with some of the modern talents. If we were still in the days of, for instance, Strained and Optimist being some of the top damage talents, That discussion would lean, I feel, a lot more towards the Pakhan, but now, yeah, it is a hard sell. And I'm not here to sell it to you. I'm just here to give you the numbers so you can make your own educated discussion or educated decision. Because it isn't horrible. This definitely, if you're just running around and just shooting enemies and damage-wise, you don't need the highest, you're not in legendary or such, you're just solo running around doing activities. This can be very easily used, and we'll make it so as well that it's very easy to proficiency it all the way up. Same for the Nimble Holster. You know, these are tools that aren't horrible and don't get in the way at the very least, and can be used here and there, so proficiencying them is pretty easy. Of note is that also, yeah, they are in the season track in the same way as last season. And also, I would have a call to action here. If anybody gets any of these to drop in the open world through targeted or through, for instance, exotic caches or stuff like that, if you could provide that screenshot of that for me, because at the current time, I actually don't know if these are in the general loot pools. With the systems, the way it should work is that once you get it from the season track, once you have the blueprint, that it should go into the target loot pools. Last season with the Exodus and the Oxpecker, that wasn't the case. The only way we got several extra of them was through the stretch goals. Now, is this intended? Was that the way they wanted it to be, or was that just a mistake and it's just not in the targeted loot pools? I do not know yet. But for the time being, in the guides, I've actually set them up as currently unknown. So if you do know, well, maybe we can change that currently unknown into a currently known. And yeah, that brings us to the end of this lengthy discussion on these two exotics. I packed them together because, yeah, I felt them being the season exotics, especially Nimble, there wasn't too much to discuss there, so we patched them together. In the future as well, the catalyst, of course, is on the table, but the catalyst is currently broken. So I'm going to wait, actually, till we get a fix for it, hopefully in whatever 0.1 patch that we get for this TU24, as to getting a fix for it, because I want to use it in gameplay and not just discuss its numbers. Because currently, in its numbers, it is obvious that the weapon damage end of things, at the very least, isn't working. It's giving 1 stack's worth. It's giving 2 weapon damage worth, which is leading me to think that it's 1 stack. And yeah, in that form, it is kind of, yeah, not the real thing. And while I could discuss it on a theoretical level, I would rather just run it as well and kind of get a feel for it, as always, with all of these gear and weapons. So when that gets fixed, we'll definitely follow up on that one. But actually, for future ones, we're going to go into the build collection updates, as of course I've done a few, so we'll discuss those. And also into the global modifier, the hardcore global modifier of this season. So yeah, I hope you join me for those. If you did enjoy this video, please do any and all of the algorithm things down below. It does help out, so I'll do that little bit of shilling here. And I hope to catch you all in the future. And as always, have a good night.